Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Jessie Haas. I am the Senior National Director of Programs at Pet Partners. And this is a Facebook Live that we call Volunteering with Your Pet. And it's a time for me to share information with you about volunteering with the therapy animal program. So, my goal today is to walk particularly our prospective volunteers through what volunteerism actually looks like, the places you visit, the types of visits you might do with your pet, and then also talk about requirements and steps to register so that you can actually go out there and be active with your pet as part of the Pet Partners Therapy Animal Program. So that's what I'm going to be covering today. If we do have some current or existing volunteers listening, awesome. We love having you. Please stay and hang out and actively chat in the comments. Share your experiences or what you think of what I'm saying. I know our prospective volunteers really do like hearing from those who have been at this for a while. But like I said, the information is primarily for folks who are considering if Pet Partners is right for you and if this type of volunteerism is right for you and your pet. So I'm going to get started in just a moment, but it's always really helpful for me, if you're listening, to use the comments on this live to let me know where you're from and what kind of pet you have. If you want to share your dog's breed, that's great, but I'm also really curious to know if we have any non-canine handlers out there because we do register other species. Um, so you can type that in and that lets me know who I'm talking to and what kind of information might be helpful for you. In addition, at any point while I'm talking, please do put your questions, your comments, your concerns, any clarifications you want me to make, either on the topic I'm talking about, or if you have a totally separate question, that's okay as well. From time to time, I will jump in those comments and see what's coming through. So let's go to our first slide. Like I said, please do say hello. Let me know where you're from as I get started here. So whenever I do these, I always think it's most helpful to start by explaining what therapy animal volunteerism looks like, because then when I move into talking about the requirements that we have or what the expectations are, you can understand why we have those requirements and expectations because they are all in support of the type of volunteerism we do. So when we talk about Pet Partners volunteerism, you'll hear me say a lot, visit. That's what the nomenclature is. So when you go out with your pet into a facility where they want you to come and kind of share that healing power of the human animal bond, you are visiting that facility. So places where our therapy animal teams visit, I have a list up on your screen. This is not an exhaustive list. These are just some of the most common places where our teams go. By the way, when I say team, I mean one person, you, the handler, and one pet, your pet. That makes a team. And so teams go into all of these places at the invitation of the facility and spend time with the clients, patients, students who might be residing there or at these facilities at that time. So let's move to the next slide. And we're going to talk a little bit about types of therapy animal visits. Once again, this list is not exhaustive, but I think it gives you a sense of how these visits kind of unfold. So the majority of our visits, I would say, are social visits. And I don't use the word social to imply that they are um, casual or not important or just for fun. In fact, our social visits can be very, very full of impact. So I'll give you an example. Many of our teams go into nursing care facilities for senior citizens or for the elderly. Our teams who go once a week or once a month, this is something that the residents really look forward to, particularly those who maybe don't receive a lot of other visits because maybe their family lives further away or their friends have passed on. So when a Pet Partners Therapy Animal team goes in and just spends some time with people, that is a wonderful way to reduce isolation. So again, social visits can be full of impact. Some of our more structured visits, such as pairing up with a physical or an occupational therapist or some other therapist. Um, and in these cases, I'll just give another example. It's often the team, like I said, pairing up with a therapist who might be serving a client or working with the client or patient. Maybe it's a physical therapist who is working with somebody who needs to increase or improve the fine motor skills in their hands. Our team would then come to that session, and one of the exercises the therapist might ask the client to do would be to pet or to brush your animal. And Through doing that, the client or the patient has the opportunity to practice the skills the therapist wants them to. So, this is a little bit more structured than social visits, also very important and full of impact. The third bullet point you see there are reading programs. We have one called Read With Me. This is obviously a literacy based volunteer opportunity. How this often looks is teams will go into libraries a lot, sometimes schools as well, and they will make themselves available to children who want to practice their reading. And the libraries will often set this up as, a Saturday afternoon program, come and read with a pet partner's dog or a pet partner's cat. And the children will take turns coming, sitting on a blanket with you and your pet, and get a chance to read to your animal. As you can imagine, animals feel very non judgmental to somebody who is just learning how to read. And it's often a big motivating factor for children to practice their reading if they get to do it when they're sitting next to a pet. Last but not least, I just wanted to highlight stress breaks. These are not terribly different from social visits in that when you are interacting with somebody who's receiving a stress break, it can feel pretty much like a social visit. However, they take place with people who may be going through some sort of acute stress or a stressful moment, right? So we see a lot of stress breaks happen on university campuses, for example, during finals week. Teams will go in and meet with the students who may need a break from all that pressure they're feeling as they get prepared for their exams. We also see stress breaks happen a lot in airports, where travelers who are fearful of flying might be experiencing a lot of stress, and getting 10 or 15 minutes with the therapy animal team can help bring down some of those stress levels. Again, not an exhaustive list, but I hope it gives you a sense of what teams might be doing when they're out visiting in some of the facilities I just showed you. We can go to the next slide, but I am going to take a peek at the comments right now and just see what has come in. See, we have folks from the Twin Cities. That's actually where I live. We have a very large, robust group of Pet Partners volunteers here throughout the metro area. Las Vegas as well, lots of Pet Partners volunteers there. Bend, Oregon. My brother lives there. Beautiful, beautiful place. We have a small but mighty number of volunteers in that area. Arkansas, Illinois, Baltimore, more Minnesota, California. Wonderful. And I'm seeing all dogs right now, which actually I can piggyback. No pun intended, because we do register pigs. Uh, but I can parlay that right into talking about species. So I know most people listening right now are dog handlers or dog owners, and that checks out. 94% of our teams are made up of a handler with a dog. However, we do accept all of these other species. That is something that really sets Pet Partners apart from other organizations, is that we recognize that the human animal bond is not just between dog and human or just horse and human, but that other species are able to bond quite well with humans and again spread that healing power of that bond to others. So if you have any friends who handle non-canines and they're looking for a place to do this, Pet Partners is likely the spot for them. Oh, good. Marcy's here. Marcy's one of our existing volunteers, and she has a bunny. So, um, it's wonderful to have so many dogs, but there are some situations where sometimes a non-canine is actually a better choice for the facility or for the patient, the client, or the student. Maybe it's allergies or fear of dogs, things like that. So, anyway, great to see so many dog handlers nonetheless. We can go to the next slide. So I've given you a sense of the types of facilities where people visit and what a visit looks like and the types of animals who do these visits. So now I want to switch a little bit and let you know more about the commitment. If you do choose to join Pet Partners, what do we expect of you as a volunteer? Ultimately, Pet Partners believes that, your volunteer journey is your own. We want you to choose facilities and times and days and hours that work best for you and for your life. We also believe strongly that it's important you consider what's best for your animal. There are some pets who love visiting constantly. They have a lot of energy. They'd go every day of the week if they could. There are other animals who do better visiting on a slower pace, maybe once a month. And we really want you to consider what works best for both you as the human and for your pet. And sometimes it takes a little bit of trial and error when you get started to figure out that cadence that's right for you. But ultimately, it's up to you how often you visit. It's also up to you where you go, to some degree, right? Again, you have to consider what's best for your animal. If your animal seems to really prefer children, even if you want to go to a senior care facility, you might want to choose something that is better for your animal. Um, you absolutely can approach facilities of your choice and ask if you can come and visit or volunteer. So you can kind of do your own grassroots efforts to find a facility where you visit if you so choose. We have a lot of people, with children enrolled at a specific school and they really want to go visit that school, or a parent who is in a nursing care facility and they really want to go to that facility. But also, we try to make choosing a facility a little easier on you. We do have a volunteer opportunities directory that is available to all of our registered volunteers. Right now, there are over 500 visiting opportunities throughout the United States. And not even all facilities who accept Pet Partners teams will come to our website and post their opportunity in our directory. So that's not even representative of all the places you can visit, but it is a resource for you to use once you become registered, to take a peek at what's available in your area. And you can reach right out to the facility yourself and say, hey, I'm Jane and I've got a dog Fido and we're looking to visit once a month. Is this something you would like me to do? Does that work with your schedule? So you really get to own that process yourself. One thing to consider when you're deciding how often you want to visit, or just trying to get a sense of what the commitment is like for you, just remember that the time that you visit in a facility is only kind of one part of the commitment. Namely, I want to point out that before you go on a visit, grooming is essential for all species, and that is for infection prevention and control and hygiene reasons. This is covered in our policies and procedures. So if you get further with us, you'll learn more about grooming and its importance. But that is something you'll have to build into your time. Does not need to be a professional grooming, by the way. Could be an at-home grooming. And you also need to consider that after a visit, you and your animal will likely be pretty tired. Um, and maybe some of the current volunteers on here and listening can chime in. Therapy animals often love visits, but also it's emotionally and physically draining for them. So they come home and they'll often nap a lot. It's not time to go to the dog park or go to a family gathering. So you need to figure out sort of how it fits for your animal schedule as well. So I think we can go to the next slide. I see a good question here from Elena. So Elena asked, can we get a list of volunteer opportunities before we become pet partners? If you have a pet partners account and you log into your volunteer center and you scroll down, there is a volunteer opportunities directory there that you can take a peek. I believe I'll have to check for sure if prospective volunteers can access that information. If you cannot get to it there, I know registered volunteers obviously can. You can contact us. We can put the contact us link in the chat. If you want us to look it up for you and say, hey, there's 10 facilities in your area looking for teams, we certainly can do that for you if that's really important that you know that. I do just want to point out, again, I can't stress this enough. We have teams at something like 2,000 facilities, and only about 500 will post in there. Usually, the ones who are posting are facilities who are having trouble finding teams on their own, or who just really love the program and want more teams. But there are lots of facilities that never even feel the need to post there because they're able to find teams locally through their own methods, or they have teams approach them. So I just wouldn't get too discouraged if you really want to visit at this facility or this type of facility and they're not in the directory, because that by no means you cannot go there. So like I said, Elena, log into your account, scroll down. If you can't access the opportunities, please contact us and just let us know that you're trying to figure out ahead of time what's available in your area. Okay, good. So it is only available after they've completed registration. Wonderful. And then Marcy asked, where do the facilities post their info? So facilities can, I don't know, Marcy, if you're looking for us to give you a direct link of where facilities can enter that information, or if you're just asking if it's possible, they do give it to us and it gets posted. So there's the opportunity for facilities to post that directly on our website, and then it will show for people in that area. Just looking at other things that have come through. I think I've covered everything. Wonderful. Okay. Thank you for your patience. A lot came in the last minute or so. Um, so I've told you what visits look like, where they take place, and how you get to set up your own volunteer journey. If this all sounds relatively good to you, then the next kind of set of questions you need to ask yourself as you're considering this is my animal eligible? So age matters. All animals need to be at least 1 year of age, with the exception of our pocket pets. That's rabbits, rats, and guinea pigs. They can be just 6 months old, but all other animals need to be a year. You also need to have had the animal living in your home for at least 6 months. So you may have adopted an older animal who meets the age requirement, but until they've lived with you the requisite amount of time, you cannot register them. Of course, this is just so you know and have seen them after they've settled into their new home environment and sort of determine for yourself if they have the qualities you think make a good therapy animal, which we'll get to on the next slide. All animals do need to be house trained. There are some exceptions around birds, but since I don't see any bird handlers here and they're a pretty rare species, I won't go into that. But all species need to be potty trained. All species, all animals need to be able to be leashed at all times. So, can your animal tolerate a leash? Obviously, if it's a dog, that it can walk loosely and calmly on a leash. Some animals wear flat collars, others wear harnesses. We do have a list of acceptable equipment as you get closer to evaluating and registering with us, if you want to take a peek at that. But all animals do have to be leashed. No animal can eat a raw protein diet. That is for infection prevention and control reasons due to some pathogens and other issues with animals who are on that kind of diet. No animal can have a history of being aggressive towards other animals or towards people. Just a quick note on prey drive, especially with canines and felines. Obviously, we understand there are some animals who, they like to chase squirrels or they're distracted by squirrels. That isn't necessarily aggression. The one thing you do have to keep in mind, though, is that visits can occur outdoors in certain cases. So if your animal cannot be controlled in these types of situations, and I mean controlled, not like physically controlled, but if they can't be directed by you or if they can't listen to you when they're on a leash, then that is definitely something to consider. But we certainly don't want to have any animals who have been aggressive towards other animals, because with the growing popularity of therapy animals in lots of settings, as well as the presence of assistance animals and things like that, your animal will encounter other animals on a relatively consistent basis. So no aggression towards other animals, and of course, no history of aggression towards people. And then I do want to spend just a moment talking about eligibility when it comes to medically and medications. So we have plenty of animals in the program who have chronic or ongoing health issues. We have plenty of animals in the program who may have a disability. For example, several dogs who are tripods. We have cats who have vision issues. And those animals are acceptable for the most part. The main thing we're looking for is that animals are comfortable. So if your animal has a chronic health condition or a disease that makes them uncomfortable in any way, we don't want them as part of the therapy animal program for two primary reasons. First of all, we're very committed to animal welfare and well-being as an organization. Our animals are not tools to help us do what we want to do as people. So we might really want to engage in this volunteerism, but if our animal's condition makes them at all uncomfortable, that isn't fair, and we don't want to put an animal in that situation for their own well-being. The other reason we want to make sure an animal is comfortable despite a disability or a health condition is because when an animal is uncomfortable, they are more likely to react negatively, and that becomes more of a risk and a liability. And that's true for even the most docile, sweetest animals. When they become uncomfortable, their behavior can change. So again, those animals are allowed who have disability or a medical condition, so long as that does not make visiting uncomfortable for them. Now, there are some exceptions where certain conditions are not allowed and certain medications aren't allowed. If your animal is on a regimen of a medication that's ongoing, I strongly encourage that you reach out to us before you get too far in the registration process, just to make sure it's okay and it's not on our disallowed list. And usually medications are disallowed for a number of reasons. Again, one might be infection prevention or control. If it's an immunosuppressive drug, for example, that can be an issue. If your animal is on a short-term regimen of a medication like this, all that means is your animal cannot be evaluated or begin the program. Or if they're already registered and they experience a health issue and they need to go on a disallowed drug for 2 or 4 weeks, they just need to take a break from visiting. And once they are done with the treatment and it's been a few weeks, so it's cleared their system, they can return to visiting. I'm really speaking more about medications that your animal is on an ongoing basis. And then last thing in terms of eligibility is around obedience skills. And all animals must have some basic level of obedience for their species. And we're going to talk about obedience a little bit later in more depth. So I think we can go to the next slide. I'm looking at the comments here. Looks like lots of helpful links are being thrown in there by my colleagues, so that's wonderful. Okay. So if your animal's eligible, then you can start to consider what makes a successful therapy animal and does my pet fit in that mold. So therapy animals should be people-oriented, sociable, and friendly. And I mean that specifically that they are people-oriented, sociable, and friendly to strangers. Because when you're on a therapy animal visit, you are going to encounter strangers over and over and over again, even if you go to the same facility. Just a personal anecdote, before I started with Pet Partners a number of years ago, I had this wonderful, very docile, gentle, empathetic dog who was so well behaved and easy to be around, and everybody loved him. And I thought for sure he would be a therapy animal, that he was a great candidate. But as I began to learn more about what makes a great therapy animal, I realized that he probably wouldn't be, because even though he had all of those traits, his initial reaction to strangers was usually one of hesitance. It wasn't until he really interacted with somebody a few times that he started to really be sociable with them and seek out interaction. So, and that's another really important point, is you want your animal to enjoy interactions with a wide variety of people and strangers, not just tolerate them. And there's a very big difference there. And usually it's in how they seek out that interaction. Animals should also have good basic obedience skills, which I already mentioned. This does not mean that they need to be obedience stars and have gone through obedience trials. What we're looking for is an animal, for example, with dogs, who can sit and stay and come when called and respond to that direction even when there's distractions. Because when you are in a hospital, for example, or a school, there are going to be loud noises, fast moving people, lots of things to smell and see. And so we want to ensure that the animal can perform those basic obedience skills or demonstrate those basic obedience skills even when distractions are going on, because there are going to be times where you're going to need to put your animal in a sit and a stay and have them wait something out. And we want to make sure that they listen to you. That helps keep your animal safe, helps keep clients, patients, and students safe. So obedience skills are really important, but we're just talking basic obedience here. Animals should be calm. Um, they can seek out interaction and be excited for interaction, but also approach it in a calm way. And that can be a delicate balance for some animals, especially when they're younger, especially when they're younger dogs. But that calmness is important, because too much exuberance makes interaction with some clients, patients, or students a little bit more difficult. And then, of course, another mention around that non-aggressive behavior. Let's go to the next slide. I want to talk about successful handlers. And somebody already pointed this out in the comments, that I just went through a list of things that make a successful therapy animal, but a lot of what makes a team a success is teamwork and partnership, and the ability for animal and human to come together and to work together. So obviously I need to talk about the role the handler plays in all of this. In fact, at Pet Partners, we put a lot of emphasis on the handler, and you won't see this as much with other organizations, but we really believe that it is the human end of the leash, because you're the human, because you're making the decision to be there, that so much of the interaction with the public and keeping it safe and effective is really up to you. So, handlers should also be friendly and professional and enjoy interacting with strangers. This doesn't mean that you need to be a really chatty extrovert, but also do understand that sometimes you're going to take your animal into a situation to meet with somebody, and the person is going to be as excited to talk to you as they are to pet your animal. So, you need to be open to that and willing to do that with them. We are looking for handlers who can predict and proactively redirect their animal's behavior or direct their animal's behavior. This is where a lot of the communication comes in and understanding your animal as a partner, right? So if you're in a situation where you see somebody approaching your animal in a way that might make your animal a little bit fearful or a little bit stressed out, um, being able to proactively address that is something we look for in handlers. I'm just going to pause here because I'm getting a message that my video is frozen. But as long as people can hear me, I'm going to keep going because being able to see me is not as important as being able to hear me. Um, the other thing that we look for in a successful handler is that you are always ensuring your animal's well being at all times. So, when you are visiting with somebody, yes, of course, you want to make the interaction a positive experience for them. But your number one priority is to your animal at all times. So you're always paying attention to them. You're always making sure they're comfortable. You're always helping ensure their stress is as low as possible. That's really important for our handlers to do. And then, of course, we want our handlers to follow all of our policies and procedures, which are contained in our manual and in our coursework, which all prospective handlers will have to take. And we're going to talk about in just a moment. We can go to the next slide. I'm just checking to see if my video has unfrozen because on my end it looks just fine. Um, hang in there with me. Okay. Well, it sounds like it might still be frozen and we might be having some issues with comments, but again, I'm going to keep going through because if you can hear me and you're joining us live, um, then hopefully you're able to hear me. Um, I'm kind of coming towards the end here, so make sure that you're keeping track of your questions or comments if you haven't put them in yet. But I want to spend this last little bit talking about the process of becoming a Pet Partners team. So these are up on your screen, some of the steps of the registration process. This is not necessarily a complete list of steps. There are some I have chosen not to include in here just because they're relatively self-explanatory. Instead, I just wanted to show you sort of the bigger pieces. So step one is you need to create an account and start your registration. Once you start your registration, all of the steps will appear for you. You can come and go from your registration at any time, meaning you don't have to sit down and complete all the steps at once or fully understand everything at once, but it does give you a nice overview of, sounds like I've been lost.